Counting to 4. At about the age of 20, I fell deeply and irreversibly in love with jazz. I remain in love with jazz to this day. But before jazz, there was country music, or in the vernacular of rural Virginia of the 40s and 50s, hillbilly music. My muse, Hank Williams, was still alive, as was Bill Monroe, Kitty Wells, Merle Travis, Lefty Frizzell, and most of the pickers and singers of that time that made it a classical era. I love me some Slim Whitman, and I'm a liar if I say I don't. In 1954, my Aunt Ruth was kind enough to take me to a Grand Ole Opry touring show. A teenager with a pink suit and a two-piece band was one of the acts. It was Elvis Presley. I had never heard of him at that time. He tore the house down. But it was Slim Whitman that I had most wanted to see and hear. He was what I wanted to be if and when I grew up. I loved his music then, and I still do to this day. Now, my younger brother, Jimmy, I also admired. He was something of a musical prodigy. He taught himself to play the guitar. In 1958, 6 weeks before his first attempt at picking, he was good enough to quit high school and join a rock and roll band called the Little Green Men. Little indeed. Jimmy was then 6'6" and weighed about 275 pounds, with hands about the size of baseball gloves. The band members all dyed their hair green. For a couple of years, they gigged in and around Cape Canaveral, Florida, for all the rocket scientists who wanted to do the twist when they weren't launching rockets into space. I admired him as if he were an older brother. I yearned for his approval. I envied his success as a performing artist and as a talented songwriter who had songs recorded by big star singers and made it onto the top 100 charts. One of the mountaintop experiences of my life was when, after seeing my one-man show, John Brown, Trumpet of Freedom, in New York, he hugged me and whispered in my ear, "You done good." That was the first and last compliment that I ever got from him. I would occasionally visit him in his digs in Nashville, and he would regale me with stories of being on the road and working with singers and musicians whom I had long held in great esteem, my heroes. But he seemed always on guard that I never get any approval for anything that I accomplished. And now we were terrible name droppers. We argued by trying to outstar each other. He would name drop, say, Farron Young, and I would respond with, say, Burt Reynolds. And he would elucidate his friendship with Kitty Wells, and I would remind him that I had done a scene in a movie with Barbra Streisand. Then it would be Conway Twitty, Raul Julia, Hank Thompson, Rip Torn, Tom T. Hall, George C. Scott. Once, he was torturing me by recounting playing on a show that I figured out that Slim Whitman was on the bill. Then I stuck my foot in it right up to the thigh. Before I could repulse my impulse, I blurted out, "How was Slim Whitman?" A sneer that would have made Sterling Hayden proud slowly blossomed across his face. I sat stunned and silent as a rabbit at the bottom of a pit, staring up at the barrels of a shotgun, waiting for the trigger to be pulled. After what seemed like several hours, the scowl reached its zenith and froze. Then he dropped the big one. That son of a bitch can't even count to 4.